So, hello everyone, and welcome to INFOFISH podcast on the global shrimp industry. My name is Shalene Anthony Sami, Director of INFOFISH, and I'm very happy to welcome all of you to this first INFOFISH podcast in series, where we will be discussing trends and challenges of the multi-billion-dollar global shrimp industry. It gives me great pleasure to introduce our panel today, who are leading industry experts. Dr. Manoj Sharma, Director of Miyank Aquaculture Private Limited in Gujarat, India. He's also the President of the Gujarat Aquaculture Farmers Association. Mr. Jim Culkin, the Group Managing Director of Syme Canadian Limited, a major international trader of frozen food and based in Bangkok. Ms. Fatima Firdaus, freelance consultant on international fishery trade and marketing. She has during her 33 years full-time employment with the UNFAO and INFOFISH, she has worked in the capacity in fisheries industries, policymakers, and development organizations. And Mr. Jose Antonio Campuzano, the Executive President of the National Chamber of Aquaculture of Ecuador, a private institution on behalf of the Ecuadorian shrimp industry. And our moderator today is Ms. Firoza Boranuddin, who's the editor of INFOFISH International magazine. So thank you very much to each one of you for joining us today, considering that we're all from different time zones. I think we all agree that this year has been unlike any other year due to this COVID pandemic that has sort of started off with the closure of the Chinese market. When that happened during the Lunar New Year peak trading season this year. In fact, many exporters and also the others in the trade sort of value chain suffered tremendous losses due to this by a sort of single-mindedly targeting the Chinese market, particularly during the Lunar New Year. And thereafter, of course, we saw the rest of the world just being affected tremendously with the markets shutting down and being crippled one by one. So we at INFOFISH, our mandate is to monitor and continue the international situation, both at the global, regional, and at domestic levels. And the purpose of this podcast actually is to provide these updates to the industry, to our member countries, and all those who are in the industry itself. So we have many issues to talk about, and we aim not to only cover the impact of the virus or the pandemic on the industry, but also to cover other factors such as sustainability, biosecurity, as well as market opportunities. So to begin in this event, I'll hand over to Firoza.
Thank you, Shalene. Good morning, everyone. I hope it will be my pleasure to meet all of you again in another one of the INFOFISH events, hopefully soon after all these, the pandemic-related events have died down. I wanted to start immediately because I think we only have an hour and a half, and we'll start with the market overview. I will invite Fatima first, who will speak about an assessment of the markets in 2019. And after Fatima will be Jim, who will speak about what's been happening in the first quarter of this year. So these will be the first two panelists for this particular theme. Fatima, if you could please start the ball rolling.
Thank you, Firoza. Good morning, everybody. Okay, let's see what happened in 2019. Just to start with, we had just at the end of 2019, almost at the end of 2019, we had the INFOFISH Shrimp Conference in Bangkok in November. And in that conference, there are representatives from the different parts of the world talking about the production of 2019. And that one plus the Aquaculture Asia Pacific magazine, that is Ms. Zurich Americans magazine. I look at these two sources and came up with an estimate of 4.45 million metric tons of marine shrimp, farm shrimp production in 2019. So because we need to see what was the production like, and then we move to the volume traded in the international sector. And that 2.45 million tons was about 17% more than the year before. Now, on the international trade, last year, I estimated that about 100 markets all over the world imported 3 million metric tons of shrimp at an estimated import value of 22 billion US dollars, where India was number one, followed by Ecuador, and exports increased almost by 9% from India and very, very high 27% from Ecuador. These are the two major exporters, followed by Vietnam, Indonesia, Argentina, China, and Thailand. Now, Vietnam, according to our calculation, exports declined by about 32%. Indonesia increased marginally, 2.6%. Argentina down, of course, that's marine shrimp. China minus 25% and Thailand minus 7%. So that's the global export scenario for the top players. On import side, an estimated global imports of, as I said, 3 million metric tons and almost 22 billion US dollar. The four markets, the top four markets, which in my opinion, I think China is number one. I'll tell you why. Followed by the European Union, USA, and Japan. These four markets imported almost 80% in value term and about 82% in volume of global shrimp imports last year. Now, in my opinion, as I said, China was probably number one because there was 180% increase in imports in China last year compared to a year ago. And although official imports indicated about 722,000 tons of shrimp, I did a calculation on that estimate on the unreported trade, which was usually very high during last 4 years, but it came down quite a lot, particularly from Vietnam. But it has increased, interestingly, from Myanmar. So that is about another 90,000 to 100,000 tons. So if we put it together, it will be like 812,000 tons of imports in China last year. That makes China as the number one in the world trade. And the second one is European Union, which is about 808,000 tons, metric tons. And then USA 700,000 tons and Japan is 220,000 tons. So in the China market, the top suppliers, among the top suppliers, Ecuador sold 261% more in China, India 300% more, Thailand 58% more, Vietnam 177% more direct imports, exports, and others also. So this is something that makes China as the focus for most of the exporters, shrimp exporters worldwide last year. And according to CAPMA report about per capita consumption, they were talking about 2 kgs in 2019 in China. So that's a huge, if you multiply it with, and then he also said that China might be able to take about, imports, 1 million metric tons a year on average. It hasn't reached there yet, but that's the way it is. Now, on the European Union, we see a 3% decline compared to 2018 at 807,000 metric tons. That includes the intra-European Union trade. But of course, we all know that 73% or more than almost 73 to 75% of this is coming from extra-European Union, that is extra-EU trade. And extra-EU trade last year was 592,000 metric tons. And Ecuador and Bangladesh are the only two. Ecuador had a 27% rise in exports and Bangladesh had 3.8% rise in exports to the European Union. The rest of the exporters didn't really get to sell more to that market. The top markets in the EU, of course, is Spain, France, the Netherlands, Denmark, Italy, and UK. All of them had minus development in terms of imports last year. Then I moved to the US market. In the United States, there were barely any increase compared to 2018, about 700,000 tons, less than 1% increase compared to 2018. And supplies increased by 13.7% from India, 3.5% from Vietnam, 9% from Ecuador. And imports of shellon and peeled shrimp increased but declined for processed product by 19%.
Sorry,
So,
Fatima, you have 1 minute to finish that, yeah?
Yes, sure. So this is the thing. And then Japan also, very a very minor rise, 1%, basically supported by value-added imports. The other markets we see imported more because of cheaper prices in Korea, Taiwan, Hong Kong, Malaysia, Singapore, and in the Middle East as well. So that's basically the scenario to start with. And then now we can see what happened right after that, because all the shrimp, everybody focused on Chinese markets. It really crashed because the Lunar or Chinese New Year sales was a real failure, unfortunately, because of COVID.
Okay. Thank you, Fatima. Over to you, Jim.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. So the first impact of COVID was China. That was the first victim, I guess, for the market. When China locked down, they locked down Wuhan, and then also impose regulations for the rest of the country just over Chinese New Year, prior to Chinese New Year. Then I guess the first shock wave hit Ecuador, as Jose will testify, when there was a lot of product on the water on the way to China, and I'm sure a number of companies in China saying, no, we can't take any. So I'm sure there was a lot of containers left in the port, and Ecuadorian exporters, producers scrambling to work that out, a lot of money on the line. And then as it progressed, we realized that it wasn't only going to be China, where, as I say, the biggest impact was Ecuador, but also India certainly affected by it. India, a major exporter to China, and to a lesser extent, Vietnam, Thailand, Indonesia, some other South American countries. So that was the first shock to the industry. Everybody getting quite panicked, not knowing what's going to happen when, as Fatima said, the largest consumption market is indeed China. So that's the largest importer of shrimp in the world, and all of a sudden that just basically coming off a cliff and shutting down overnight. So that was quite a shock. But then as COVID spread, and we started to realize that this wasn't just a China problem, but going to be a global problem, even before WHO named it officially as a pandemic, we all knew that it was a problem. And country by country started restricting things, started restricting movement, started shutting down, started quarantining, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, started closing restaurants, hotels, people stopped getting on airplanes, then airlines shut down, et cetera, et cetera. So then we had simply a global collapse, you know, within a very, very, very short period of time, where there was no understanding of what business would be. So you have restaurants shut down, you have hotels shutting down, you have airlines not flying. You have cruise lines shutting down, you have theme parks shutting down, casinos, any, sporting events, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So this is a massive impact to the seafood industry and all food industries, mind you, immediately, very quickly, not a slow market decline or even a rapid market shock, but a complete unprecedented event which shut everything down instantly. So the the net impact, obviously, food service shut down, and since then, we've seen some recovery in some areas of food service, mainly going into restaurants and restaurant chains and companies that were able to ramp up to home delivery, to online ordering, using existing online sites as well, or doing their own just telephone and restaurant pickup. So that softened the blow to some degree, but still, if you look at restaurants, the consumption has got to be down as a whole. It's got to be down by 80, 90%, 80% anyways. And then you have the entire hotel industry, which is simply shut. Hotels are maybe doing some effort to do home deliveries and stuff like that, but that can't be a significant percentage of their normal business. Again, we've got theme parks, cruise lines, casinos, anything where food service is related to is either shut down or running at a bare minimum. On the other hand, retail ratcheted up very quickly, and people stopped going to restaurants, they stopped traveling, they stopped going to hotels, but they still need to eat. And as people went into lockdown, quarantine, work from home, people still wanted to eat, and they still want to eat good food. Some seafood is very high-end, expensive stuff, and I'm sure sales of things like, crab and lobster and Japanese scallops, people would be more conservative when spending that type of money. But basic shrimp items are pretty much mainstream now, and not really a luxury item anymore at all. So sales of those really ramped up. I look particularly at the United States. The retailers started to experience very good sales, in-store purchasing, and also online. I mean, companies like Walmart, who is probably the second biggest online retailer in the United States after Amazon. In fact, they are. So there's a lot of things that can be delivered online there. So retail has really ratcheted up everywhere. Frozen food is a good product for this type of situation. People reducing the number of times they go to the supermarket, most people doing so to reduce their exposure. So going to the store once a week or once every 10 days, you can buy frozen food, and it's there for as long as you want it. As long as you've got electricity, you've got frozen food in your freezer. So retail sales have really picked up. Our own company has seen a big increase in orders, largely from the US and Canada, to a lesser extent from Europe, but still able to help pick up quite a bit of the slack, certainly not all of it, from the slowdown in sales into the food service sector. Restaurants are starting to reopen in certain countries. The lockdown is lessening. Some countries are opening up. In my opinion, way too quick. I think people are jumping the gun here. I don't think we understand this virus. I don't think we understand the implications. I don't think we understand nearly enough to be saying it's all safe to go back in the water now. I think we should be giving it another month, but I'm not the guy deciding. So. People want to get back to work. They need a salary. They want to go back and have their normal lives. They want their kids back to school. So this is the way it's going to happen, and we'll see. We're going to get a rebound or not. I suspect we will, and I think it'll put us further back than the original thing. But anyway, that will happen. What I will say is that things have changed permanently. I guess that'll probably be the next question, the next topic we'll deal with. Mm-hmm. But obviously, we still have an enormous void of sales, and that is the food service sector, and that is going to take a long time to recover. That's not going to be 6 months or a year. That's going to be several years before we get back to where we were. Okay. Mm-hmm. All right.
Okay. Thank you, Jim. I think between you and Fatima, you've given us a very nice global picture. I'm just going to go now to the two main countries. here, and we'll start with Ecuador first. Jose, if you could speak to us about the Ecuador shrimp market, and if you could go pre-COVID and also then the first quarter of this year, and then after Jose will be Dr. Manoj. So that's how we'll go about it. Jose, please.
Yeah, very good. Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, well, thank you and good morning. And yes, Fatima and Jim already explained some of the situation and the context of the industry. And as Jim mentioned, Ecuador had a very interesting 2019 with growth of around 21% in volume. If you look at Ecuadorian numbers, the growth of the industry, it's been there for the last decade to 15 years in a very steady way. I'd like to call it in a very not only a sustained growth, but a sustainable growth, trying to produce a balance between the growth of the industry at the farm level and at the same time the growth of the markets that we rely on. But definitely the presence of China has changed the industry in ways I think nobody could foresee. And that brought an additional variable to the COVID analysis for countries like Ecuador. Because, and you already know this, but the growth of Ecuador is being pushed by the growth of the Ecuadorian shrimp market in China. So when you have a country growing based on the volume of exports they can get from a specific market, and that market gets hit by an emerging disease that afterwards is declared a pandemic, it's a very important and worrying situation. And I've had this discussion with the president of Ecuador for the last 15 days. Because when you try to understand what's happening and you take the first 2 months of the year, the picture is different from the picture that you have in your mind when you add up March and April. And I will try to explain this really clearly. If you look at Ecuadorian numbers, Ecuadorian shrimp export numbers from January and February, you'll see a growth of around 22% in volume again. And you may say, well, that's pretty much based on the experience and the market developing in China. And it actually wasn't. And Jim already explained this. November and December were really good years for Ecuadorian exporters to the Chinese market because of the volume they got to sell. And when the outbreak of COVID-19 was announced in China, pretty much end of January, we were in pretty much the week before the Chinese holiday. And that's a very big day for us. It's like Black Friday for us. So when you have the most important dates in your most important market being affected by an outbreak and a disease, you need to do something to move product from that market to another one which is not impacted. And if you look at the numbers of Ecuador in more detail, you'll find that the actual growth of January was produced by exports to the US and not exports to China. We grew around, I can give you the numbers, but it was around 6,000 metric tons to China, to a growth of 900 metric tons to 9,000 metric tons to the US. So that was the first year in around 8 years, the first month in around 8 years that the exports, the Ecuadorian shrimp exports to the US outgrew the exports to China. And that was because we already knew it was really difficult to sell to China because of the outbreak of COVID-19. So January growth of Ecuadorian exports was actually produced because we managed to sell more to the US than the volume we sold to the growth that we had in the Chinese market. That almost happened in February as well, but we tried to sell a little bit more to the EU. Both US and EU markets weren't affected in January and February. They were affected in the end of February and of course during March. But at that time, the Chinese market recovered. So we were very lucky to have this balance between affected markets in different chronological times. So if you look at the numbers and from March and April, and you compare that, let's say, to March and April 2019, it's pretty much the same volume, and it's a good news. But when you compare that to the growth we had in January and February, which was 22% in average, then you start seeing how affected the market was because of the COVID-19 outbreak. Ecuador should have exported around 140,000 metric tons of shrimp in March, and we exported around 118. So you see a drop volume produced not only by the market already affected in China and in the EU and the US, but because of Ecuador was affected itself by COVID-19, and especially Guayaquil and the Guayas province, which accounts for 80% of the total production of the country and 95% of the total processing capacity of the country. So it was a combination of a market affected and the capacity of the country to process and export shrimp. And we could say, if you look at March especially, you see how Ecuador was doing well. And when in March 16, Ecuadorian authorities declared curfew, they declared a state of emergency, Ecuadorian exports dropped dramatically. So that's why we have a month of March affected not only by the market, but by our own capacities to process the shrimp coming out of the farms. And I know there were a lot of news around how shrimp farmers were affected not only because of international prices, but local prices within Ecuador, because there weren't enough capacity to process shrimp in Ecuador. So local demand to process shrimp was really affected during that time. Ecuador has to recover around 60% of that, so we are now working at around 80 to 90% of our capacity. But April numbers still show that there were no growth in our exports from the numbers we got from April 2019. What we project will be the rest of the year is a very slow and a hard recovery, and a very painful recovery. Jim already covered this. Half of our exports are dedicated to the hotel, restaurants, and catering industry. That's pretty much, along with the airlines, the second largest industry affected by COVID. So I think we should talk about, and we will talk about how to promote shrimp in a time of crisis. But what we see, I agree with Jim, is a very slow recovery, a very painful recovery. Not all companies will recover from this. This is something to learn from. We can analyze our dependence on markets, but at the same time, globalization helps you. When the market is affected, then another one is arising, and when a couple of markets are affected, another one is rising. So you need to play with globalization to try to keep your market alive and your exports alive. Okay,
thank you, Jose. I think I think it's the last question, I think, that for today, that we will be speaking about predictions for the rest of the years. But it's very good that we've had a little bit from all three of you about a little bit of what's going to be happening, or what already has happened, and also what may be happening towards the end of the year, the whole year. I shall now invite Dr. Manoj. I know you say you're just a simple shrimp farmer, but I'm sure you can give something on the markets as well for India. Thank you.
Good morning to all of you. As you know, I'm from the farming sector. So whatever I'm going to talk is from the producer's perspective. I'm not like an expert like Fatima and an authority like Jim in marketing insights. But if you see, because when we produce shrimp, we have a very close eye with the market movement. So if you see a pre-COVID scenario, when the India farmers have produced close to 800,000 tons. So out of that, the finished product which were exported to the global market was close to 635,000 tons. So if you divide this, our 100% of export, so 45-46% goes to US, 28-30% goes to China, and Europe is very down, maximum 8%, and 7% to UAE, and maybe 7-8% to Japan. If you see this overall picture, it's very unfortunate for India that this COVID infection, when we're talking about the COVID scenario, the birthplace is China, Wuhan, which is a very promising market for India. And the most devastated country is US, where we have almost 45% of our market. So unfortunately for India, this together is 70-75%. So you can imagine the fear psychosis what the market goes through. And when we talk about the amid the lockdown and the post-COVID scenario, you know, right now the industry and the processors, they have a little shiver in their spine, like what is going to happen. As Jim very clearly said, it is not that it will take months, it will take few years, because whatever Fatima and Jim has said, they have given the very insight. But right now, if I see as a producer, our main season starts all over India, because we have on West Coast and East Coast some severe extreme climate. So shrimp in our area is majorly starts from February, March, and ends in November. So the same picture is in even Andhra Pradesh. The major season of production is 8 months. So if you see some figures, promising figures have already come up in the month of January, February, exports to USA, that we have been seen upsurge of 6 to 7%. But as Jim very clearly said, and Jose said, that was a pre-COVID scenario at the first quarter. But suddenly, when we see a lockdown in our country post March 22, each and every moment of life has been affected, and everything became standstill. So all the ports, all the roads, transports, everything has come down to, the first lockdown was very severe, the 45 days. But now there is a little moment started from the April end. And whatever the figures China has taken in the first quarter, we can see now at least 15-20% of that has been started exports in US, and almost 35-40% in China. But still, there is a severe panicky among the market, and what will be the movement. So that is the present situation right now in India. And already when I'm talking to you, our Honorable Prime Minister has declared the planning for the 4th consecutive lockdown extension. So right now, because we know we have 30 small or maybe big countries within our one big country, so there's a big geography and demography things happening in India. So I think everybody is little skeptical about it, what will be the future movement of the international market, because both this China and US is our backbone of our export, and both have severely affected. So it will definitely, I agree with Jim, it's not going to take months, it is going to take few years to attain the normalcy.
Thank you. And this will obviously affect the stocking pattern as well for India. I will now quickly move on to the second theme, which is the changing consumption patterns. I'm trying to do this as fast as I can so that hopefully at the end of the podcast, we may have a little bit of time so that we can speak to each other, but that will depend on the time. So now when we speak about consumption patterns, I think there are two maybe sub-themes that I'd like to discuss. And one of them is this whole surge of online shopping, seafood now being delivered to the doorsteps. And then is this now going to be part of the new normal, which is what we wanted to know. And then we also have the other one, the surge of sales in retail packs and convenience foods. I think I read somewhere that Thai Union, for example, was having, saw a surge in profits or something like that, and that was for canned tuna. And will this trend continue as well? And so how will the HoReCa sector adapt to these new purchase patterns? Because I think both Jim as well as Fatima also has mentioned that the HoReCa sector was very, very, very badly affected. How will this sector now adapt to these new purchase patterns? And at the end of it, then we should also ask ourselves, what lessons could the industry learn from what's been happening with the changing consumption patterns? I know, Jim, if I could ask you to speak first, because I know your company handles a lot of export and imports of seafood. If you could start off with this discussion. Thank you.
Okay. Things have changed for good. I mean, let's start with online. Food is our topic. Frozen seafood is our topic. Frozen shrimp, but for everything. Now, online purchasing is already very common in China. The Chinese are very comfortable with it, and their retail sales, in-store sales have been dropping massively. The United States, not quite as advanced in China in terms of the percentage of people who buy online, but certainly with major companies like Amazon and Walmart and others, certainly very big. But there's an enormous sector of the population who've never really been comfortable buying online. It's a bit weird, it's a bit awkward. Credit cards, computers, phones, whatever. I like to go to the store and I like to try it on, and I like to smell the orange I'm going to buy and the seafood and everything else. But I mean, this was something kind of forced on a lot of people, and then a lot of people realize it's pretty easy to buy online. It's actually really simple. You get on some sites and it's dead simple. You go on, you make 2 clicks, and your credit card information or your PayPal information's in there, and it's arriving at your door the next day. So a lot of people are going, wow, this is good. In normal times when I'm not working from home, I'm going to the office, I got to pick up my kids from school, et cetera, et cetera. I don't have a lot of time to fight through traffic to go to a supermarket or a market or whatever. So this makes things much easier for me and for my family. And the quality of the product is pretty good. Now, when people are buying things like frozen seafood or frozen things online, it's quite predictable and quite easy to do. Now, when you're going for fresh produce, I wouldn't buy fresh produce online unless I had to. I mean, I'm a bit fussy when I purchase things. I think a lot of people are. But, I guess in some cases, or in more and more cases, retailers are learning to make sure that what's being delivered is good quality and people are going to be happy with it. So this is a permanent change. There's going to be a lot of people who will be buying online food and non-food items, a big increase in that percentage, and that will not change. After things get back to normal, in 6 months, a year, 2 years, then people will be more going into the stores and that, but it'll never go back to the level it was. Right? It'll never reach the level it was. So in general, brick and mortar retailing is going to shrink, whether on the food side or the non-food side. It is going to shrink. It's going to shrink permanently, and because it's just too easy to buy online. And once people get used to it, they're fine with it. Um, Consumption habits are changing now, definitely. Okay, I think frozen has been a very common format in Japan, in Western countries, less so in Asia, less so in other countries where people have been traditionally more used to buying fresh. But now, because of the situation, people have been buying frozen, either in store or online, and they come to realize it's actually pretty good product. So they become more accustomed to frozen. So frozen category will grow in seafood and other categories as well, in fruit and vegetables, in prepared meals, etc. Because people try something they probably were a little bit reticent about or suspicious about, how, how's this going to taste, and they try, they go, oh, that's not bad, or that's pretty darn good, in fact. So that's a permanent change, frozen. Things like you mentioned about canned tuna. Now, there was this huge surge to buy canned goods, canned tuna, canned fish, canned fruit, vegetables, and that was sort of a panic thing. As the COVID thing was expanding and people didn't know where it was going to go. Is this going to be is this going to be a pandemic like a global Ebola or a plague where you've got millions upon millions of people dying, and just a complete shutdown of all services and structures of every country. So people on a panic level, I'm going to stock up on canned tuna and canned mackerel and canned sardines and fruit and da-da-da. And then they find themselves at home, working from home, hopefully working from home, not furloughed or let go. And they start to have product for their lunch, canned tuna, all these different products, and they think, that's pretty good. That's actually pretty good food. So there was a big spike in that, and it dropped down now because it was a panic spike, but that consumption will increase permanently as well. So people have gotten used to things which they did not typically eat before, which they maybe thought, oh, canned product, how good could that be? And now they're looking at it more. So the consumption patterns have changed permanently. The purchasing patterns have changed permanently. This is not just like a temporary thing. Now, it was already heading in that direction. More and more people were buying online. More and more people were buying frozen seafood and frozen food in general. So this was a curve. It was moving up, but then we took the curve went into a almost a vertical increase, and it will come down again to a degree after things get back to whatever normal we can expect for the future, and how long that normal will take. But that there's a permanent change in consumption, and that won't go away.
Okay, thank you, Jim. So the message here is online is here to stay, and also a lot of people then became used to frozen stuff and also canned foods. And so this will be probably a long-term trend, notwithstanding that there was a period of panic buying of canned foods. Fatima, if you could continue, and if you could speak maybe about what lessons could the industry learn from these experiences as well. Add that on to whatever you're going to say. Thank you.
Thanks, Firoza. Thanks, Jim. Yeah, that's really interesting to know what's happening around. I would like to talk about the rest of Asia, excluding China, because Jim has already covered that. And there has been a trend of buying frozen product online even before COVID-19 in China. So what I noticed that on online or order, or even at supermarket, what we see, online order, first of all, we don't see much shrimp in the list of the products offered to Southeast Asian households. Fish, finfish, yes, vegetables, fruit, everything, but not much shrimp, because people here are not used to, first of all, frozen consumer packs are not available in most of the cases in rest of Asia online. And even in supermarkets, you can't see anything less than 2 kg packs. And people are used to buy fresh shrimp, although some of those fresh products which are in supermarkets are thawed fresh products. So that is one factor I noticed that could be because of lack of availability of consumer packs, small packs of frozen shrimp. That and the other one is price. Okay, price is of course still, it hasn't really come down that much at the retail level. Volume has come down. People are buying less and less shrimp and more other fin fish or other seafood, particularly during this time, I can see. And and as you know, here in Southeast Asia and Far East, a lot of people used to eat out 3 meals a day, even 4 meals a day, and shrimp was part of it. That is not in there anymore. So home cooking of shrimp is less, but home eating of shrimp is not really less because they are buying a lot of ready to eat products online. Yes, that is there. So the catering trade has adapted themselves to home orders, and I think they are using shrimp, part of it. But overall, the fresh shrimp market is affected. Price is a bit down. I see supermarkets holding products, not many buyers moving to the shrimp section compared to the frozen shrimp section. That is the other part of Southeast Asia. But of course, China is a different story. But people still love to have, of course, here is, head-on product, not really pilled product. And I think most importantly is that consumer packs of frozen product is not yet available in this part of the world.
Mm-hmm. Okay, you're done, yeah, Fatima?
Yes.
Okay. If I could move on to Jose from your area of the world, please.
Yes, thank you. Well, definitely, I think we all agree that online shopping, if it wasn't already there, is definitely coming to most markets abroad. Of course, the Chinese capacity of adaptation to new technology and how China has led the world into the online shopping experience is amazing. China is already there, was already there, I guess, 5 years ago, and the capacity and how many Chinese consumers are adapting to online shopping as a phenomenon was already there before COVID. So the transition from a physical experience of buying to a non-physical online shopping experience was so easy because it was already part of their lives. But when analyzing how a consumer buy or consumer patterns, it's not only about the availability of the technology, which the case of China is so interesting. And I remember a couple of years ago in the China Fisheries exhibition, we had a forum with the Tmall and the Alibaba guys, and it was amazing how inner cities were already adapting the technology. So it wasn't a technology dedicated to serve people in the big cities of China. It was actually pretty much penetrating all the territory, and it was amazing. But it's not a matter of technology and the availability of the technology. It's also a matter of it's a cultural thing. I think Fatima already explained this, but you need to be in a culture of shrimp eating in order to be willing to go online and buy shrimp. And this we've been analyzing this for a couple of years now with the team within the chamber, trying to and he's working really hard with the Seafood Nutrition Partnership in the U.S., trying to and convincing the U.S. consumer to eat more shrimp or eat more seafood. And the thing that is that you find yourself trying to explain a household or a mother how to cook shrimp, and this is not about it's not only about the availability of the product and the platform and how you buy it, but how do you cook it. And then you find yourself with consumers that do eat shrimp, but most of the time they used to eat shrimp in a restaurant. So when you shift your consumption from restaurant to house, it is different. From my side in Ecuador. I have my freezer filled with shrimp, and I know how to cook it. But when you move that experience to a U.S. consumer and to even a European consumer, even in Spain and France and Italy, they do eat a lot of shrimp. But when you go inside the market, then you realize it was a consumption in a restaurant. So the part of the challenge is to move that consumption from restaurants, from catering, from hotels to the household. And of course, the technology plays a very important part. Is the channel that you will move the product. So if you are working with platforms, you have half of the battle already won. But then you have the other one, which is educating the consumer how to select the product, and then you have to adapt your presentation. A 2 kg case, it's not the best presentation for a platform, maybe in the US, maybe it is in China, but not in the US. And then you have to adapt your product for the platform, and then you have to adapt your product for the use of that particular consumer, because pretty much he won't be able, or she won't be able to cook the shrimp in the right way, because they haven't cooked it before. They pretty much ate it in a restaurant. So the challenge is big enough to for big companies to sit down and try to develop a strategy to reach their consumers in the new normal, which is let's say change by the COVID, which is not going away in the next couple of years probably. And the second question that we need to address really quickly is convenience. It's not only about platform, accessibility to the product, or the culture of eating shrimp, but also at what price range, because the new consumer is not certain about its financial future. So when people is afraid about its financial future, they shift their consumer patterns, and they don't spend so much in some items, and they spend a lot of money in other items. So whereas shrimp as a protein in the top of mind of the consumer, it's not chicken. It's definitely not meat. Within the seafood, shrimp is a very high-end protein. So, and those you buy them, you eat them, you ask for them, you order them in restaurants and high-end places. But when buying online, maybe you don't go and, okay, I'll buy my shrimp in a platform. No, I buy my shrimp in a very high-end restaurant. So that's something else we need to address as well.
Thank you. I think that the idea of price, I think that was a very important point, because also in Malaysia, I see this happening as well. People simply stop eating shrimp because it is so expensive now. And I'm wondering now how the retail sector will be able to get a cheaper, I don't know whether they could do a cheaper retail pack of shrimp. But then again, you've got to ask, will the processors in producing countries, will they be able to keep up with the demand for lower priced retail packs, for instance, something like that,
Well, they've done that in the USA. I mean, US retailers, they've been very cognizant, very conscious of consumers' desire for something that is affordable. So Ecuador, I have to say, is a higher end product. It's the head-on shrimp from Ecuador is probably, as far as the Chinese concerned, is the number one quality. The headless shell-on shrimp from Ecuador is considered number one quality. It's not chemical treated. It's frozen in an extremely fresh state, and therefore Ecuador product is higher end. They tend to focus on mid and larger sizes rather than smaller sizes. Now, looking at India, Thailand, Indonesia, Vietnam, let's say more focus on chemical treated product, more focus on price. Now India is less focused on chemical treatment than say Thailand or Vietnam or Indonesia, but nevertheless it's very price conscious. So in the US, all the major retailers, Walmart and Safeway and Ahold, etc., they've been downsizing consumer packings. You know, I mean, from 10 years ago, when the most common consumer pack was £2, down to £1, down to 3/4 of a pound or half a pound, and reducing the size of the shrimp from a big shrimp, a 1620 or 1315 or whatever, which is expensive, and going down to much smaller size shrimp, whether it be cooked or easy peeled or peeled, to 4150, 5160, 7190 CPTO is a very big volume seller in North America, and that becomes a product that's not a luxury product. In many periods of time, it is competitive with other proteins in terms of its price, and that will translate online too. It's different. It's a different experience. Eating a 7190 raw or cooked shrimp is not the same as eating a 1620. You know, a chemical-free 1620 versus a chemical-treated 7190. It's not the same, but it becomes more accessible to a much broader range of consumers.
Okay, good point, Jim. Can I invite Dr. Manoj now for what's happening in India?
We have to see pre-COVID actually what are the where the major market drivers. If you see in last 1 decade, this total shrimp production from 2.5 million ton has upsurged to 4.5 million ton, almost double the production. So if you see really what has really the major drivers, where the proper organization of the retailing and the distribution network pan across the world. And second, what I think is the value addition of the product over the raw supply. And also, if you see the developing countries like India and especially Ecuador, the promotion from the government, the awareness and the incentive schemes has really supported the development of this aquaculture sector, and that has helped to double the production of the countries. And also, for example, when we talk about China, what really helped China's consumption, as Jim said, definitely Mr. Jose has added the point, the culture of eating the shrimp. When we talk about India, why India, the poultry section has been so successful? Because when we talk about non-veg in India, I think if I'm not wrong, 80% is only we talk about chicken. Wherever we go and talk about non-veg in India, it's all chicken, butter chicken, chicken tandoori, all varieties of chicken. So I very agree with Jose. Yes, the cultural values and the eating habits is the paramount factor in increasing the market. I've been, as a farmer, I've been thinking from many years to how to promote this domestic consumption in our country, how to increase that. So I will tell you an example. Last 3-4 years, I've been working on a very modest cost restaurant, which is Jingalala. The name Jingalala, you can search it on internet. Jingalala. Jinga means the shrimp, Lala is the people. So I'm very much agree with Mr. Jose that when I started the restaurant 1 year back in Surat, so I came up with all the Oriental and the European menu in it. But to my surprise, very few people like the taste. Very few people. My sales were almost like not even $100 a day in the restaurant. But then I understood from the very feedback, it was a very, very educating and learning for me to how the consumer values and the behavior impact their consumption. So everyone was coming and asking me, don't you have some Gujarati version? Because we are in Gujarat. So the Bengali is coming and asking me, do you have some Bengali cuisine? Do some foreigners, they are coming, do you have some Thai like that? So you'll be surprised that within 3 months, we have to re-engineer the entire menu and the cuisine. But very positively, I have seen when you introduce food into the culture values of the local consumers, it changed. And we have seen that our restaurant has done very well after we have re-engineered the menu. So same thing, what impact I have seen in the acceptance of the food. So whether you go to Europe, or whether you go to Chinese, or you go to Italy, or you go to Africa, people will love to consume the shrimp in their own fashion, in their own culture. So I definitely agree with Jose what he said. It's very true. And supporting to the statement of Mr. Jim Kulkin, yes, there is going to be an enormous change because whatever shrimp right now in the world market is sold is 65 to 70% is Horeca in the hotel, restaurant and cafeteria. But we have seen amid COVID, there was a huge upsurge in the online and the retailing segment. But putting to the support to the point of Fatima, that what she said, online also we have like a pack which is institutional pack which has been designed for Horeca marketing. So to continue to this online, I think we need to become little fashionable. We need to become more awareness on the nutrition, on the cuisine, and packs has to be redesigned, calibrated as per the demand of the retail and online to continue that segment. And it will be an all new segment. And I'm very sure this is going to be an add-on market in the near future.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Manoj. I'm going to go straight away as well into the production sector now. I'm going to ask Fatima. Fatima, are you there? Yeah. Okay. I'm going to ask Fatima if you can start the ball rolling with a global outlook on the farmed shrimp production up to the end of 2019, and then we'll move on to other panelists.
Okay, thanks, Firoza. As I said earlier, the estimated total production last year for farm shrimp, excluding freshwater, is about 4.45 million metric tons. Now, China was number one, about 1.4 million ton. India was 800 plus, 804,000 tons. Vietnam 550, Indonesia 370, Thailand about 300. So, and Ecuador is 620,000 tons from Latin American side. So that's basically the scenario on total aquaculture production of Baname and black tiger on the global side. And of course, we can see that in China, very little exports, more imports, meaning that more production of 1.4 million is going to the local market. India and Ecuador, that aquaculture sector is highly export oriented today. In other countries, it's not, it is changing, like in Thailand, in Malaysia, in Indonesia, part of the products are going to the domestic market as fresh product, and part are exported. In Thailand and Vietnam are trying to sell more semi-processed and processed products. Whereas Indonesia is also doing a part of it. The rest of it with Ecuador, mostly head-on and headless. This is something I wanted to ask Jose as well. How many % of head-on of your product is going in form of head-on product? I know most of it are raw product, but I'd just like to know how many % of your exports are in head-on form.
Yeah, it is around 80%. It is very close to 80%. If you account the Chinese market and the EU market as add-on products, pretty much that's a straight 8% of our production.
Yeah, good. I call it, in my opinion, that's value addition. is real value addition. You keep 30 to 40% of your shrimp, and that is added value to your exports with the taking of the head. And that is something really interesting. If we can really, to the new markets, if we can introduce products as a head-on shrimp, that will solve a lot of waste problem and add value to our production and exports as well. Thank you.
If I may add, then you have two things to address. Number one, of course, is an issue of quality. To achieve a head-on product at a very good quality, at acceptable quality, to be exported to a market for 5 days away from where you are is definitely something that you need to develop in time. But the thing is that I think everybody knows that during September and October, we had to deal with new requirements from the Chinese market. And those requirements right now, we're in compliance with those, but number one is a requirement of a white spot test before exporting to China. And you need to do that if you're exporting a head-on product, according to OIE, of course. But if you're exporting a headless product or a peel and deveined product or a cooked product, then you don't have to. And that's pretty much because of a risk analysis, and there's no disease in a cooked product. But so relying on an 80% head-on product will bring on some other issues you need to address, like testing on your product, because the risk of moving disease from one country to another, and we can talk about disease present in producing countries, that's a different issue. But in the end, that's part of the variables you need to take to account when trying to get in a strategy like developing a head-on product for your producer market, for your export market. If you look at the world right now is looking to new ways of controlling emerging diseases for animals. So yeah, that's a very interesting issue, but it's important to take into account when dealing with head-on product in the case of shrimp.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, it's now what? Oh God, it's nearly 1 o'clock. I will now invite Dr. Manoj. This is your field, the farm shrimp production. If you could please start.
You want me to talk about the Indian farm production?
Yes, please. Yes, please. Yes. See, the Indian production, as well as how will the COVID-19 pandemic affect the farming activities for this year, and by extension the supply for this year.
See, I will just take a minute more to make the world understand how was the scenario of Indian shrimp farming. See, you have to understand that from three and a half decades, shrimp farming there in India, until 2009, the major production of India was within the range of 65,000 to 70,000 tons and purely black tiger. And then came in 2009 the Vietnamese tsunami, and then everywhere there was like only shrimp farming and shrimp farming. And to talk about the pre-COVID, let's stick to 2019. In 2019, Indian shrimp farmers have produced close to 800,000 tons of shrimp, and from a scientific culture is 160,000 hectares. And we still continue. We have some traditional belt of West Bengal pouring in some 25,000 hectares. So if you see overall, India has geared up to produce almost 1 million ton. And so the industry, the hatcheries, the support industries like feed, healthcare, and the processing, each and everything is geared up to cater to that 1 million ton production. But suddenly, very unfortunately, we had this COVID-19 infection, and it has been there on the mindset of people right from the mid of the December. This China has some emerging disease, but nobody took it very seriously. He said, maybe as if everybody lived, like all now 183 countries where we have an infection, everybody lived a very normal life. There's nothing going to happen. But the seriousness of this has come to understand on the Indian's perspective when our government has halted the entire activity by declaring a serious lockdown on March 22. Then we understand the serious implications of this lockdown. It is not only aquaculture, or it's not only, it is everything, even from a grocery shop, even getting a water bottle to a wine bottle, everything was restricted. And that fear psychosis, and suddenly what happened after that, because you have to understand, shrimp is an open to sky business and with livestock rearing. It is subjected to many stress besides disease. So a shrimp farmer, for a producer himself, doing shrimp farming itself is a big challenge. Whether if there is no disease and nothing, even rearing an animal from 10 milligram to 30 gram, it itself is a big challenge. So what I personally see, that the panic, what has created, the panic triggered in Andhra Pradesh, because Andhra Pradesh is the 70% of producer in our country. Yeah. Followed by West Bengal 80,000, Orissa 65,000, and Gujarat 45,000, and rest of the India 20,000. If you see the whole 8 lakh ton production in our country, so Andhra is almost 24/7 into the system of culture. Mm-hmm. So Andhra at any given time, if you see 20% of Andhra is also almost 100,000 ton shrimp is always lying in the ponds. And when this lockdown happened, there was a panicky. And people were almost throwing material on the roads because no ice plants working, no processing plants working. There was no road transportation, nothing, no rail and no air, nothing. So we have very closely followed actually what happened. See whether one very good thing is that I will give an example of poultry industry, what happened in India during the lockdown. Because there were some misunderstanding because of eating meat and seafood. The virus, you become very susceptible to virus. So first 45-50 days India, there was nobody was touching seafood, fish, shrimp, not even chicken. So chicken has, the poultry industry has only 40-45 days cycle. So it has badly affected. It has badly affected to almost like 80 lakh crores of rupees have been devastated. The primary producers of chicken has gone out of the market majorly. But luckily, when we talk about shrimp and fish, shrimp has a minimum cycle of 120 days to 150 days. So the fish can be kept in the pond almost for 1 year or 2 years, if provided the condition of the pond is very good. But this panicky in Andhra Pradesh and other parts of the country started because they were not able to contend with the disease. Because we in shrimp farming in last 20-25 years, we've been learned with science and art to survive with white spot. But still, the biggest damager to the Indian farming system is the white spot disease. And when it is prevailing, it will give hardly a 1 day or 2 days for you to plan the harvest and finish it. So that panicky, and that because even the processors were not sure whether China is going to open or not. And earlier statement also I said, our main backbone was China and US, and both the country has devastated. So there was even a panic. Very important thing is that when we talk about lockdown, the labor mobilization and the social obligation has really affected to the each and every aspect of shrimp farming industry in India, right from farmers, the shortage of labor and labor mobilization. Same thing in the hatchery. Main season was in the month of March seeding. All the hatchery with 67 or 68,000 brood stock, 500 hatcheries were ready with the seeds. But because of suddenly lockdown, almost to my understanding, 4 to 5 billion seed has to be drained because there was no buyer, followed by the fear psychosis from the farmers because they were not ready to stock. Lack of transportation. These states like West Bengal, Maharashtra, Gujarat is purely dependent upon air connectivity for the seed transportation. That come to an halt. So to be very honest with you, these first 45-50 days, there was a massive panic among the farmers and the industry people to go about stocking. But slowly, the things are easing out. If you see the first and the second quarter, The badly affected, I think there will be a production down by 50%. But if the lockdown 4 is well calibrated and the movement is allowed, I'm very thankful to our Indian government and the Department of Fisheries. Immediately within the first week of lockdown, they prioritized, they have given the status of essential commodity to aquaculture, which has really, really helped the industry. But if the lockdown is completely finished or partially finished by end of the May, I think there will be a very good stocking movement for the second quarter, for the second crop. And I think whatever people are predicting about overall 50% damage to Indian shrimp farming industry, I think if everything is normal, India may see close to a 5 lakh ton production in the final 2020.
Good, thank you. Just one question though, because if I understand you correctly, which means that the production in Andhra will start maybe in mid-year, something like that. Was that what you said?
Yes, right now the first and the second quarter has really badly affected in Andhra Pradesh and definitely other states, because we never find the transport for the seed. So overall first 2 quarters it's badly affected. But right now Andhra Pradesh has started the stocking because Andhra is very easy, because 500 hatcheries are there. So the road transportation is very easy for the farmers. So now the airports and the cargo facilities of our Mumbai, Gujarat and West Bengal has opened up. So soon these states will also, because if you see India, 70% of the production comes from Andhra and 30% comes from West Bengal, Orissa and Gujarat. So Andhra 50% already affected and 90% affected by these states which are on the west coast of the India. So June for the second crop, I think 70-80% farmer will go for the seeding, leveling up the vacuum, and I think India will touch to 60 to 70% of what we have produced in last year, to the closing of 500,000 tons. That's what I predict as a farmer on the production side.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Manoj. I'm going to move to Jose. If I can ask Jose to speak about the the farming schedule in Ecuador, because I believe this is your low season, if I'm not mistaken. So you will be restocking a little bit later. And I wonder even whether it will coincide with India, maybe even that there'll be an oversupply from India and Ecuador in the future. I don't know. I mean, Jose, if you could please enlighten us.
Yes. Well, if you look at the numbers of Ecuador, in January and February 2020 was supposed to be a year of another 20% of growth, like 2019. But if you add March and April numbers, then you realize that the impact of COVID in the Ecuadorian shrimp industry is pretty much it will be the reason for the Ecuadorian shrimp industry to stop growing for the first time in the last 10 to 12 years. So if I should project the numbers by the end of the year, by December 2020, we'll see pretty much the same production we saw in 2019. I won't risk to say we will be able to grow, and this is because even though we have managed to deal with the difficulties of locking down the country and the difficulties of processing shrimp with less people than in prior months, the market is sending signals to Ecuador to stop growing. So if it's not only COVID pushing hard the processing part of Ecuador, because at the production size we didn't encounter too much problems So production wasn't affected by COVID, wasn't affected by the lockdown as much as processing. So once processing plants are dealing with, and this is was part of this is because the government at the first day of lockdown declared export activities as essential activities. So we weren't affected by the lockdown because we were declared an essential activity. But still, even though processing companies are dealing with the lockdown in I think, a very good way. They managed to deal with it, and they are preparing themselves to protect their workers for a second wave of COVID outbreak in Guayaquil. Hope not, of course. Yeah. The market sending so strong signals. Then, if it's not a logistical side, the market size is pushing Ecuador not to grow. So we'll probably see an Ecuador producing the same amount of shrimp and exporting the same amount of shrimp we saw in 2019, if we are lucky, of course. Then you need to add the price variable and the recovery of the U.S. and recovery of the EU market that we are not experiencing yet, of course, and we are betting on that recovery very soon, not at the same levels of 2019, of course, but showing some signs of slow recovery, of course. And we hope to see those, but still, there is no space to grow like we were growing for the last 10 years.
Okay, thank you, Jose. Jim, I know that this is not really your field. I mean, you're doing more trading, but if there's any comments that you might like to add to production and supplies?
Yeah, okay. I see there has been, let's say, you know, we're riding a roller coaster right now, and the farmers are trying to catch the right wave. They're frightened that if they do normal production, that maybe there's going to be overproduction in the market. And that's one side pushing them. And the other side pushing them is currently there's a scramble for product, particularly retail. India has been locked down, so a lot of that product, those sales have moved to Indonesia or Thailand and Vietnam, but they're moving back to India as India ends its lockdown, and as things look like they're going to return to normal. Now, something that I'd say a little bit alarms me, what Dr. Manoj says, if India production gets up to 500,000 metric tons, then I suspect that will create an oversupply in the market, because I don't see Indonesia production dropping. I think the Indonesian farmers, there was some panic harvesting or quick harvesting prior to Ramadan. Now we're right in Ramadan, coming up to Eid al-Fitr, and typically in Indonesia they do they almost clean the ponds out before Eid because they don't want product in the ponds during the holiday. So I think Indonesia will recede and production there will be pretty normal. For Thailand, farmers are pretty unhappy with the prices. They've been unhappy for a long time. So 300,000 tons could easily go down to 250 or even 200 for 2020. Vietnam, prices are moving up there in terms of the local raw material prices. Retail, as I say, has been reasonably strong, even though food service is a big component there. So I would say the farmers in Vietnam will have impetus, will have reason to seed as well. China, of course, for its domestic market, I mean, China has massive challenges in terms of industrial pollution and disease and everything else. But if the market is strong enough, then production there will at least maintain. That being the case, then we have a potential for a real downside for the market. Now, I have been really considering the balance between this freeze or real drop off on food service consumption versus a big increase in retail and a big increase in online and everything else. Now no matter what, the consumption is way down. I mean, no matter how much an increase we get on retail and how much online and how much home delivery fills takes up some of the slack. The food service is a huge component of seafood. It's a massive component. And with everything that isn't going to recover this year, airlines, hotels, I mean, restaurants will recover to some degree after we get a few months out of this, the feeling, the fear of it, and get people to go out to restaurants, etc. But if we do have 70 to 80% of Indian farmers stocking, we do end up with 500,000 tons. And if we do end up with Indonesia being similar, and Vietnam to be similar, and Ecuador, as Jose said, Ecuador to maintain last year's production level, then I think come end of the year, we're going to have an oversupply situation globally in a very weak market, which isn't going to help too. So.
Okay, thank you, Jim. We have the fourth and the last theme today, which is the global markets, which is characterizing, what do you think will characterize the global market from now till the end of the year in the short and the long term? Now, throughout this whole morning, or throughout the whole hour and a half, we've actually spoken about a lot of things, and they've sort of intersected here and there. And so I would like to combine this with the individual summary or your last comments, so that we can, speak in total about the markets as well as the short and the long-term effects. And I would like to start with Jim first.
Okay, all right. Further to what I was just talking about in terms of supply, it really hinges on what seeding we're going to see and how comfortable, confident, or bold farmers are going to be in terms of reseeding. If reseeding is as we just discussed, then I see a weakening market towards the end of the year. And conversely, if farmers decide to be conservative and hold back, then we could see a fairly stable market. I don't see any reason for a market to be particularly strong. Retail alone is not enough to give it that shot in the arm. In terms of consumption, well, people aren't going to be in restaurants for the rest of the year. I mean, it'll come back bit by bit, but we're not going to be like where you can't make a booking at your favorite restaurant. That's not going to be there anymore, except with social distancing, and they're going to have fewer people in the restaurants. Many restaurants are going to go out of business. Many standalone restaurants, many multiples are going to go out of business. The hotel business is finished for the rest of the year. There's not going to be, thousands of tourists moving in any direction. So we know food service may have some recovery, but I would say food service recovery, if we got a 20% recovery between now and the new year, that would be fantastic. And I think that's overly optimistic. So the consumption is not there. Very much a lot hinges on seeding and what the farmers decide to do and what they feel comfortable with.
Okay, thank you, Jim. Fatima, if I could ask you to continue, please, the short and the long term, as well as your last comments, your summary.
You're muted, Fatima.
Yeah. Can someone send a message? Oh, Jose is muted as well.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Now I have 2-3 points, just dots. We got to look at the overall production scenario in terms of supply and demand this year, whether and price as well. If production is going to be almost same, looks like, or maybe 20% less or 30% less than last year, it's still quite a lot compared to the HoReCa sector's consumption. Almost, Jim said 20% recovery by end of the year, which means 30% less demand, or rather sale, in the HoReCa sector. And whether the retail is going to cover up that gap or not, which we really doubt. Second thing is, even if it does, to some extent, global recession is a main concern. Okay, shrimp is affordable luxury to many places, but at the same time, with the high rate of unemployment in USA going up, and particularly the markets, sorry, the exporting countries which are heavily dependent on USA have to really watch those Western markets, USA and Europe, very carefully. And how much China can take. If everybody again moves to China and try to sell more, definitely the price will drop. How much drop and how much drop the farmers can take so far. So here comes, we have to, as Dr. Manoj said, we have to develop the domestic sector as much as possible and wherever it is possible, particularly in case of India. In Southeast Asia, it is there. The consumption of shrimp it's quite high, but again depends on per capita, will definitely depend on consumers' disposable income, how much they can spare for buying shrimp. So this is something that we need to look at and balance, and not just produce and kill each other in the marketplace. I think we need to talk to each other, the producing countries, together with the marketers like Jim, and balance production so the farmers do not lose money, because last 2 years shrimp prices are already down. Of course, it generated consumption, increased consumption, but how much can they take? Can they take further dip in prices? This is something that we need to really look at.
Okay, and on that note, we'll move to Jose. Jose, for short-term and long-term, as well as your summary, please.
Thank you for your question. I think I agree with Jim, with Fatima. The production will still be there. The speed of the adaptability of the industry at a producing size, sometimes it takes some time to react to a new market, and definitely COVID has shown us how fragile the market already was. Fatima already said it. Prices were down already in 2019, and COVID came probably in the worst time it could came, and to demonstrate again that how fragile demand was, and how and where the shrimp market stands when the consumer needs to readapt their consumer patterns and its budget to decide where and what to eat. And I had a couple of just pointers I think we should address. And I think COVID has brought again issues like food safety, and there is no enough time to address food safety issues in food in general, but in seafood and in shrimp, of course. And that is something some consumers are already talking about. How do we get information and the food I'm buying at a platform, if I cannot take it in my hand, if I cannot smell it, if I cannot see it, but the image at a screen. Traceability, again, it was important in 2019, it was important in 2019, but definitely will be much more important in 2020. We are working really hard to come up with the food trust and the blockchain technology to shrimp, to demonstrate that it's possible, and it's just the fair thing to do, being transparent in the way we produce things. The consumer is changing so fast, and the patterns of consumption are shifting from one thing to another, from one child to another. So information will be and a way to add value to what we offer. Convenience, of course, it will be a matter of convenience. So if we want the preference of the consumer, we need to be talking about how do we bring shrimp closer to a consumer, if it is a platform, and if it is through opinion leaders like nutritionists, like chefs, like we need to move really fast. And my last message is we haven't seen the end of it. COVID just showed us how fragile the market is, and things just started to change, and they will recover very slowly. But in the end, we'll find ourselves with a different consumer, with a different way of promoting our products, with a different way of consuming our products. So we better start working on riding the wave, as Jim mentioned, but at a producing side, as a processing side, as a marketing side. So there are a lot of things we need to address in order to survive this new challenge that we have ahead of us.
Okay, thank you, Jose. And last but absolutely not the least, Dr. Manoj.
Yeah, because I'll tell you, my view is that, you know, if you see the entire shrimp industry, the shrimp trade world vehicle is actually in the four wheel. Starts with farmer, the processor, the market, and the consumer. So I'll start my message with the farmer, you know, like especially to my farming friends all over the world. See, overproduction is the biggest culprit, because the world moves with a single fundamental, is the demand and supply scenario. If there is more supply, the demand is going to be less. So what happened in last 6-7 years, especially India and Ecuador, which produces almost 30-35% of the global shrimp, there has been a very craze that any business where we can make profit is shrimp. So everybody is moving to shrimp, and that has led to the overproduction. My message is very clear to my farmer brothers: why we should produce more when we start bleeding. So the farmer needs to understand that we need to produce in a way that we should earn. Because remember, if farmer bleeds and he goes out of the business, the industry stops. So it is very important for the industry also, for the processors, for the market intelligence, the marketeers, the trade, the giants like Jim and the Sam Canadian company, they all need to think how they can give the awareness, the knowledge to farmer that he can sustain success and survive. Because remember, if farming shut down, the whole industry is going to shut down. On a very positive note, I just want to conclude that, see, today, whether we are inside the lockdown or outside, maybe after 6 months, but the mankind needs food. And slowly, the awareness of seafood, as Mr. Jose said, the shrimp in the seafood is the most prioritized food. And Jim said a very nice thing, that now shrimp is not more the luxury, is the most affordable on the common man's palate. So I think if the mankind survives, the industry is going to survive, provided it has been well calibrated, it is well under control, and that goes with the farmers. The farmers needs to understand there should be year-round production, not the seasonal production. So there will be no bottleneck of production and supply. And the farmers needs to understand that they should produce less. I'm very proud to tell that, you know, I've been educating the whole shrimp industry from last 10 years, farming shrimp Benami the tiger way. So that's the most sustainable formula. And in last 26 years, to be very honest with you, I have never lost a single penny in shrimp farming. So when I can do that, why not the world shrimp farmers do that? But there should not be a mad race to produce more, because production more in a negative carrying, when you try to produce more, there is going to be stress in the production system. There is going to be a negative carrying capacity. And when there is a negative carrying capacity, there is going to be a diseases impact and emergent disease impact. Very valid point Mr. Jose just raised, that food safety norms of the world. See, I'm a farmer from last 30 years. It is humanly impossible to manage a livestock on 150 days without occurrence of any disease. So I request the traders, the market intelligence, the buyers, the consumers, also that there should be a prudent way to treat the shrimp to make it disease-free. Because for a farmer, 150 days producing the shrimp, it is impossible. It is impossible. So also on the food safety norms, the people who talks about food safety should also give an alternative to farmers to how to produce the shrimp without using chemicals, because it is very, very impossible. So I conclude with this message and with a positive that I'm a farmer and I'm a producer. Especially in India, continue the production under control in a rotating phase, produce year round, and also we can come on a common platform to educate, to spread awareness, and to develop the domestic market. India is 1.36 billion. Even 30% of that consume 2 kilo per year. We can very well consume the entire Indian production. Thank you so much to all the panelists. It was really, really educating for me to learning all the experts. And thank you so much for inviting me and giving me a chance. I thanks to all the INFOFISH team. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Manoj. Before I pass you on to Shalene for the closing thanks and comments, my personal thanks to all of you. And I hope very much to be able to see you again soon after all this pandemic has died down. Okay, Shalene, please.
Thank you, Firoza. And a very, very big thank you to each one of you, Mr. Jim Culkin, Dr. Manoj Sharma, Mr. Jose Campusano, and Ms. Fatima Prodaus. Also, Firoza, thank you so much for your time. I very, very much understand that we are all in different time zones, and for sharing your experience and views. Indeed, it was a very enriching discussion. We got to hear about the production, the markets, the behaviors of the consumer, and what we can expect in the coming months, or maybe in the next 1 year or so. So thank you again for joining us. We wish you all the best. And to all our listeners, also thank you for listening in. And do look out for our upcoming events. Thank you.